G'day viewers and welcome to BlokesWorld. If you've been watching this year, you'll know that we've become utterly and tragically hooked on racing. We've built ourselves a race car out of a Ford Falcon station wagon and competed in a couple of endurance events. Pretty poorly as it turns out.
Boys need to go and learn how to drive.
Yeah, fair enough. So we've made our way across the Pacific to Laguna Seca Raceway in California, the home of Alan Berg Racing Schools. I gotta tell you viewers, this has been at the top of my bucket list for years. And if there's anyone on the planet who can turn us into race car drivers, it's these guys. Let's roll that intro and we'll get into the first session. You're watching BlokesWorld.
So the whole reason this came about, going to the Alan Berg Racing School, was that we made a change in direction of our format of the show last year, whereas instead of going and watching people race, we decided to race ourselves, and hence we built our own race car, station wagon, and we race in like Not a GP in the 24-hour Lemon Series, and we're having an absolutely fantastic time, and it's a brand new level for us. It's exciting for myself and Camera 3 because it's something new. When I saw the Alan Berg Racing School and saw that we'd be in Formula Renaults and at Laguna Seca, I mean, that was just a quinella right there. I rang up Alan and I said, hey, g'day mate, my name's Ado, I make a TV show in Australia. It's called BlokesWorld. Here's a couple of clips. And all these Aussie mates went, oh mate, you've got to get them to come over. So that's how it all came about. You know, once again, it was another series where Camera 3 and I went to America for 3 days. You know, you don't want to come on holidays with us because it's just a compressed action of just 3 days and then we're back on a plane. I mean, it still beats going to Belgium for 54 hours like we did for the hill climb, but actually going to Laguna Seca, I mean, you've got to realise as a bloke as well, growing up playing Gran Turismo, Forza, all those sort of car games that you play on your PlayStation, Laguna Seca is somewhere, you know, it's the holy grail of computer game tracks, you know, and the great thing about going there is it doesn't give it justice on a computer game. As soon as you're actually on the track itself, it's just amazing. And the good thing about this thing as well is that this is the sort of thing that every bloke would have on his bucket list, but wouldn't think in the world that he'd be able to do it. And that's the great thing, that you can go over there with no experience, get in a Formula Renault and go and ping it around Laguna Seca. I mean, it's amazing.
And you'll probably hear that word a lot during this episode, but now let's take it back to the start of the trip. We've rolled into the town of Seaside in California. It's right on the water, about an hour south of San Jose, and it's about 10 minutes from the racetrack. There's plenty of cheap hotels here, which is perfect for BlokesWorld. Now, on each morning of the 2-day course, Alan Berg invites you to the track early for a track walk. He wasn't able to make it himself on day one, so we were given our first tour of the track by an absolute champion racing instructor named Jason Uribe.
So the interesting thing about the track walk is it really opens your eyes, especially here on elevation, camber, little things that you can't really pick up just by going around and driving it. So I really like the track walk because it helps you see, oh, well, the curbs are grippy here, but they're not grippy here. Well, you can see the camber going up into turn one. You know, if you're on the inside of the track, you're going to have more positive camber than if you go to the outside, you'll have more negative camber. Just the little tips and tricks that take years to find in a car or on a bike, it just cuts that down to a quick 30-minute walk.
Now, I should mention, all of the instructors at Alan Berg Racing Schools are experienced career racers. But Jason, Well, he's one of these crazy buggers. When we were there, he was getting ready to compete in the Moto America Superbike Championship here at Laguna Seca. So it's fair to say you get to know a track pretty well when you're scraping your knee along it at 200 miles an hour.
He was actually racing at Laguna Seca the week after we left. So it was good for him to have a walk around, have a look. You know, absolute legend guy. Check him out. He's a friend of ours on Instagram and stuff. He's always doing some great riding. Anyway, he takes you around, explains you lines, how to use the whole track, how to, you know, where to set yourself up for corner. He gives you the landmarks so you know that, you know, as you're coming up over the hill, as you're coming up the back of Laguna Seca, try and be across to the, you know, the second strip that's coming down the wire. So you're getting all these sort of reference points of where to be in the track. The most important thing he did was we'd be walking somewhere and he kept on saying, get down to driver level. So then we'd all squat down and you'd actually be at the same level that you'd be in the car, which just changes the whole perspective of the track itself. But, you know, when you go to this course, the actual course starts, I think, every morning about 7:30, but you can get there at 6:30 to do a walk around the track. And we were that excited day one that we were there at 5:30 in the morning, just walking around, you know, going, oh man, can you believe we're about to do this?
In this general area, you guys should be off the brakes. You should have your hard braking done, get the car straight, off the brakes, and as you start turning in, you're gonna be slowly easing on the throttle. And it's the same deal with maintenance throttle. You're not gonna be accelerating at that red curve. You're gonna be on that 1, 2, 3, 4% throttle just to get the weight of the car to the outside, to get the car loaded. And then as you start to take away your steering input, then you can really get on the gas.
Well, that's it for the track walk, and excitement was building to jump into those cars, which we'll get to right after this break. Welcome back to BlokesWorld, and if you've just joined us, we've travelled all the way to Laguna Seca Raceway in California to learn how to drive. We're at Allenberg Racing Schools at 7:30 a.m. on day one. We've already walked around the track, and now it's time for a quick briefing before they let us loose in the race cars.
So once we come in from our track walk, which was absolutely awesome, we come down to our first bit of theory. And we met up with the head instructor, Thomas Merrill. If you want to follow him on Instagram, his name's Ronnie McSparkleboots. He's an absolute cracking bloke, and the guy can drive. The guy is like a professional driver, but then he comes in and teaches all of us.
We're going to introduce you to the race cars. We're going to drive you around the track in some vans. And then we're gonna do what we call a lead follow to kind of start the day. So your first time behind the wheel is going to be following a pace car around the racetrack.
Your Australian brain tells you that if you're going to come and do a 2-day course and there's going to be some theory, your Australian brain goes, oh, okay, so we're going to spend the first half of the first day looking at videos. Honestly, the theory went for about, I'd say, 20 minutes. And then from there, we went from sitting in a classroom to actually going out and walking around the cars, getting an understanding, learning about weight transferring, learning about braking, cornering, apexing, all the important things you need to know. I couldn't believe, within an hour after sitting down having a coffee, we were in the car going, leaving the grid. I mean, which was awesome because, like I said, I expected us to be in a classroom for the first half of the day.
How you feeling?
Oh man, what the hell were we thinking? We had our first car race only 6 months ago in a station wagon at Goulburn at Wakefield, and here we are now in Formula Renaults at Laguna Seca. Man, I'm a bit nervous.
So next up, Tom allocated a car to each of us and we got ourselves fitted up. Then we hit the track for a lap in a minivan with our group's coach, Matt Cresci.
Coming down the front straight here, we're coming over turn 1, and now we're making our way towards turn 2. This is gonna be a double apex turn. So we're gonna start braking back here, and we're actually gonna start kind of making our way down towards this first apex. The first apex is not super important. The main priority here is that we get a good exit out of the second apex, because that's where we have a little straightaway between turn 2 and turn 3 down there. That's where the time counts, is on that straightaway. So whatever we can do to get the best exit there That's our best possible scenario.
So by the third lap in this minivan, Matt was really starting to push it because, to show us the right lines. And if his name sounds familiar, well, that's because he's kind of a big deal race car driver himself, just like most of the other instructors at Allenberg Racing Schools. Well, there you have it, viewers. Never buy an ex-rental minivan in California near Laguna Seca. Those brakes are cooking. We'll introduce you to him later, but right now, it was time to drive.
All right, drivers, clutch in and fire it up. Day one, we start off just introducing people to the idea of driving a race car. Most of our students have never even been in a race car or been around a racetrack before. And as we cover, it's a pretty visceral experience to drive a purpose-built race car. There's nothing quite like it. The suspension doesn't move very much. It's not designed for creature comforts. There's nothing on the race car that it doesn't need to go fast. And it's a bit of a shock for a lot of drivers who've never experienced it before. So the first half of the day is about getting an understanding of what a car like that is like.
And you follow them around the track. And this goes on for about, I'd say, a good 20-minute session that we were out there. And there's nothing better because you would not want to go out there by yourself, full of adrenaline, because you just go into the first wall.
When Tom said it was a visceral experience, he wasn't joking. Up to second gear, it was a bit like a go-kart, but after that, it was just ridiculous. And it's such a good format, getting us into the cars as early as possible, because you can talk about dog box clutches and heel-toe shifting until you're blue in the face, but there's so much for your brain to deal with in that first session already, they didn't really worry too much about the finer points. Don't worry, we'll cover that and more later on. But for now, you're going to a commercial break. Don't go away, you're watching BlokesWorld. Welcome back to BlokesWorld at Allenberg Racing Schools in California. We've just had our very first driving session to get used to the cars and to get familiar with the track. We had some Canadians in our group on day one, so let's meet one of them now.
We've been racing cars this morning and this afternoon. We're looking forward to our open lapping session this afternoon, which is kind of unlimited speed and, do what you can do. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's not our first time, so it's my fourth time. So we've been doing it every year here. We have a little competition between me and my friends, and so we all compete for this little trophy and bragging rights for the next year. This is year 4, so my friend Glenn's won it twice, I've won it once, so I've got to get even this year. Allenberg's an ex-Formula 1 driver. He teaches you proper racing technique, so your heel-toe technique in terms of controlling the throttle and the brake, but really just kind of the proper racing lines. What's really neat about this school is they have these cars equipped with Motec equipment, which you can review your lines after, you can review your braking pressure, your throttle application, and so you can really kind of go out and say, this is what I should have done last time. The instructors can point out and say you broke too early, you broke too late, and you can learn each and every time you go out, so it's great. Well, I think what a novice would learn is, what kind of performance you can get out of these cars in particular, but so you learn really proper braking technique, proper throttle technique, so it just makes you a better all-around driver. I mean, these cars are set up to race, but in terms of taking that and applying it to the street, I think it's just kind of the proper technique just in terms of braking and really trying to understand what your car might be capable of doing. I've been out in some sports cars, so Porsches and Ferraris and that kind of thing, which is a totally different experience because you have so much power, right? So these cars, it's really more about the technique and the finesse of getting around the track on the proper line, where you get out with some of these cars with a little more power and you can get in trouble a lot more quickly.
Gee, I don't know. I think we still managed to find a little bit of trouble, but more on that later. For now, let's cut back to Ado, out on his very first session on the track.
We all get back in, and that's the funniest time, when you actually get back in from that first little stint. And camera 3 and I would always be in the same group. So as soon as we get in, I'd just take the helmet off and I'd look at him, and camera 3 would look at me, and we'd just be beaming.
How'd you go? That was the best fun I've ever had in my life. Crazy, eh?
It was that exciting that the night before, even though we just landed from America, we virtually couldn't sleep because we were looking forward to this. Jet lag, everything like that, never even had a chance once the adrenaline kicked in. But it was more the fact that the very first session that we did was just follow the leader, get a feel for the car, don't do anything stupid, that'll come later. You know, so it's just be safe, learn about the car, get into practice. For us, like I said before, it was the first time we've ever changed gears with the right hand. So that was kind of weird. I was banging the left-hand side of the car for the first 3 or 4 corners.
And indeed, you might be wondering what kind of transmission these Formula Renaults have in them. Well, Tom, our lead instructor, covered that in the briefing.
For upshifting in these cars, they have straight cut gears. It's a dog box transmission. We don't need the clutch to upshift in these cars. You're going to gently pull back on the shift lever while you're still accelerating forward. That's going to preload the transmission. The gears are going to be under load, so when you pull on that shift lever, the car won't shift yet because there's going to be a lot of load in the transmission. You're going to lift back on the throttle pedal, and as you do, you're going to feel it click into the next gear. You're not necessarily going to have to change your load on the shifter, although the more positive the load on that lever is, the cleaner the shift will be. The only way to mess up an upshift in our cars is to do it too gently, because you may actually find a space between the gears.
And by the afternoon, we had that pretty sussed, absolutely banging through the gears with plenty of pressure on the shifter and a quick lift of the throttle. Oh yeah, you better put your visor down at these speeds too. Downshifting though was a whole other matter, and we'll tell you all about that after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to BlokesWorld, where we're learning to drive in these Formula Renault race cars at Allenberg Racing Schools in the USA.
Downshifting is a little more complicated though. You don't technically need the clutch to downshift, but I recommend using it to start with because it will sort of butter knife smooth everything over. Any mistake that you make, the clutch will sort of fix. The hardest part about the downshift, as soon as you put the clutch in, the engine RPM is going to go down to idle, but the rear tires are still spinning at whatever speed you're going. And so when we re-engage that next gear, we want to match the RPM to the wheel speed to make it a nice smooth shift. So you've got a clutch, brake, and throttle that you have to manipulate all at the same time at some point, and you've only got 2 feet to do it. So if we're going to the brake with your right foot, and you're going to have to use your right foot to engage the throttle, you're going to use your left foot for the clutch. We're going to blip the throttle with the edge of your right foot as we're down on the brakes. You're also going to move the shift lever forward to engage that next lower gear. The easiest way to mess this up is to start rushing the whole process and to do everything as fast as you can right away. I'd recommend to start off slow and only worry about getting the clutch out fast. Everything else can be all right. But what I want to clarify with that blip is you don't want to be leaning on the throttle pedal. You don't want to be on it for any longer than you absolutely have to be. A blip is literally just touching the throttle. The throttle mapping in these cars is pretty aggressive, to say the least. You get about 10%, then you get about 100%. The reason it's designed that way is because they don't make that much horsepower. They're momentum cars, and so generally when you drive these cars, it's either 0 or 100% throttle. So throttle mapping is designed as such. So you'll find you actually don't have to do a whole lot of work to get a nice accurate blip. But the hardest part ultimately is maintaining brake pressure while you're doing all of this. And this is where seat fitment and pedal position and foot position come into play. The traditional way would be to leave your heel relevant to where the throttle pedal is and rotate your foot diagonally over to grab that throttle pedal. And then that's why they call it a heel toe technique. If you have wide feet, you'll find that you actually don't need to do this whole diagonal foot thing. You can actually just use the side of your foot, leave your foot totally perpendicular to the ground, and then just do sort of a lateral movement with the right side of your foot.
Now viewers, I know we've spent this whole episode following a pace car, but it's only mid-morning on day 1 right now, and after just a couple of these sessions, building up speed every single lap, they let us loose onto the track and we could drive at our own pace. And I've got to tell you, I didn't feel for 1 minute constrained or held back during these first 2 sessions. By the end of the second one, we were humming along pretty quick, but that first open session, oh man, what a rush. You'll have to wait till next week's episode to see that, but before we go, I asked Ado how he'd compare these 1600cc Formula Renaults with the BlokesWorld race car.
Oh look, if you're going to compare these cars to our Ford Falcon station wagon, the first thing I was going to say would be we didn't have to change the pads once. Whereas in the Falcon, we're doing that 3 or 4 times in a day. Whereas these things, they just bite and grip. And the great thing about them is that you only have to whack it on, and as soon as you whack the brake on, the weight goes to the front, everything just gets a bit better in the steering. And it took me like towards the end of the day where, you're coming over that hill and you're seeing the 3 lampposts and they're saying, hit the brakes on the last lamppost. And I'd always hit them before that one thinking, oh man, that's not enough room. And then until you have the instructors going, stop driving like a woman, and actually hit the brakes at that point, you'll be okay, Ado. And after, getting a bit angry and went, right, I'm going to do it this time, lo and behold, no problems at all.
Well, that's all we can fit in tonight's episode of BlokesWorld. I hope you enjoyed it. But right now, why don't you head over to our website to grab one of these awesome new packs, which will see you getting a BlokesWorld Flaming Wallet, a DVD sampler featuring all the action when we went to the Ambler Hill Climb in Belgium, as well as that, some action from the 24 Hours Lemons race. You'll also receive a packet of Jack's Black Label beef jerky, a stubby cooler, some stickers, a badge, and guess what? It all comes with free postage. We'll see you next week.